Hey, if you're prepping for the CMA exam, you know that earnings per share is a really big deal. So in this explainer, we're going to demystify basic EPS step by step. The goal? To make sure you can walk into your exam with total confidence on this crucial topic.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start with why EPS even matters in the first place. Then we'll dive right into the formula and we'll break down both the numerator and the denominator with a really practical example. And finally, we'll wrap up by covering the most common exam traps you need to watch out for. Let's jump in.
Okay, so first things first. Why is this one little ratio so incredibly important? Well, it's all about taking a company's huge total profit and boiling it down into a context that investors can easily understand and, more importantly, compare. At its heart, EPS tells us how much of a company's profit is tied to each individual share of common stock. You can think of it like this. It's the slice of the profit pie that belongs to a single share. And honestly, it's probably the single most relied upon performance measure out there.
That is a fantastic question. And the answer really gets to the core of what corporate ownership is all about. We have to single out common stockholders because their claim on the company's profit is fundamentally different from pretty much everyone else's.
And this slide really shows you that key difference. Think of preferred shareholders as being first in line. They have a priority claim, they're promised a fixed dividend. The common shareholders, well, they're the ultimate owners. They get what's called the residual, basically whatever is left over after everyone else gets paid. And it's that leftover piece of the pie that basic EPS is all about measuring.
Okay, so now that we get the why, let's roll up our sleeves and get into the how. This formula right here is going to be our roadmap for the rest of this explainer.
So here it is. It looks pretty straightforward, right? But for the exam, precision is everything for both of these components. We have to calculate the exact income available to common shareholders for that top number and the correct weighted average of shares for the bottom number. Let's go ahead and tackle that numerator first.
All right, let's start with the top of our fraction, the numerator. Our whole goal here is to figure out the exact amount of profit that belongs exclusively to the common shareholders. You know, it really all comes down to this one critical adjustment. We start with the company's total net income, and then we have to subtract any dividends that are owed to the preferred shareholders. Remember, they have that superior claim, so we have to account for their piece first before we know what's truly left for the common stockholders. Let's use an example from the source material to make this real. So, this company has a net income of $870,000 for the year. That's our starting point. But here's the question. Is all of that money available to common shareholders? Not quite.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. Let's look at how we make these adjustments. We start with our $870,000 net income. Simple enough? First, we subtract the $4,000 in dividends that were declared on non-cumulative preferred stock. Easy. But then, we also subtract $12,000 in dividends for the cumulative preferred stock for the current year. And this right here leads to a huge exam tip.
Now, this is absolutely crucial, so listen up. For cumulative preferred stock, you must subtract the current year's dividends even if they haven't been declared yet. The company still owes that money, which means it doesn't belong to the common shareholders. This is a classic exam trap, so you've got to be ready for it.
All right, with the numerator locked in at $854,000, let's tackle the denominator. Now, calculating the share count isn't as simple as just taking the number at the end of the year. We have to properly account for how the number of shares changed during the year.
This is another one of those major trip-up points on the exam. It's so tempting to just grab the year-end number of shares, which is 360,000 in our example, but that is wrong. And why is it wrong? Because that number doesn't reflect the capital base a company was using to generate earnings throughout the entire year. We have to use a weighted average, which comes out to 295,000. Let's see exactly how we get that number.
Okay, let's break this table down together. We started the year with 240,000 shares. That number stayed the same for 2 months, January and February, so we weighed it by 2/12. Then, on March 1st, the company issued 60,000 more shares, bringing the total up to 300,000. That level was held for 5 months, all the way to August 1st. See the pattern here? Every time the number of shares changes, we multiply that new number by the fraction of the year it was outstanding. Then we just add up all those weighted portions, and boom, that gives us our correct denominator, 295,000 shares.
All right, we've done the hard work. We carefully figured out our numerator, and we carefully calculated our denominator. Now it's time for the easy part, just putting them together.
So we just take our numerator, that $854,000,
and we divide it by our denominator, the 295,000 shares. And that gives us our final basic EPS of about $2.90, rounded. This number right here, this is that key performance metric that everyone's going to be looking at.
So let's just recap those biggest exam traps one last time so you can avoid them. First, always subtract preferred dividends, especially those tricky, undeclared cumulative ones, the phantom dividends. Second, never use the year-end share count. You have to do the work and calculate the weighted average. I promise, if you can master these two details, you are going to be in fantastic shape.
So now you've got a really solid handle on basic EPS, but the next logical question is, what happens when things get more complex? What about potential new shares from things like stock options or convertible bonds? Those could dilute the earnings for the existing shareholders, and that, well, that's where our next topic, diluted EPS, comes into play.